Hi, Dang.
Hello, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yeah, one by one joining. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
You're in time.
Yes,
Thank you for
it's,
your time.
it's 11 here.
Yeah. Swapna, good morning. Swapna, good morning. Is it audible? Swapna, good morning. Is it audible to you?
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah. I'm talking to Swapna. Swapna, is it audible to you? Yeah, Swapna, is it audible to you? Why? Please unmute your mic. Then, ఎలా మరి? Hmm? మీరు మాట్లాడలేదు కదా, మాట్లాడితే వినిపిస్తుంది. Swapna, is it audible to you?
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, sir.
Dan, you can unmute your mic.
Okay.
Here I unmuted with another. Hello.
Yeah, tell me.
Am I audible now, sir?
Yeah, it's audible.
Good morning, ma'am. So happy to be back, ma'am.
Say to Dan.
Okay, good.
Is everything is fine? Swapna, I have sent you a YouTube link as well as Zoom link. Please check once. The participants,
Yes,
is
sir.
everything fine?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Everything is fine.
Okay, thank you. So it's
So
time.
your voice now it is not clear, sir.
Is it
I'm
fine?
unable to get you.
His voice is clear?
Sir, voice is clear, sir.
Okay, thank you. Participants. Swapna, please unmute the video and audio. Please join the session. Swapna, are you there? Yeah, come to screen. Please unmute participant mic. We are getting disturbance. It's time to start our international virtual conference. A very early good morning to one and all. I'm Dr. Anvira Marao, Associate Professor, Head of the Department of Pharmaceutics, Therapeutic of Pharmaceutical Sciences. Today's international conference moderator. First and foremost, I express thanks to our dynamic and visionary principal, Professor Ramaran Najanla, and management, Sri Y.V. Anjali Garu, to provide us such a webinar facility to not stop our continuous dedication to our students. Even we are in COVID age. I cordially welcome you all on account of Chalabdins of Pharmaceutical Sciences to e-certificate virtual international conference current scenario in advanced pharmaceutical practice and date of today, 25th August 2020. Its Indian time is 8:30, as well as speakers attending it's a night time, it's 11 p.m. Our renowned speakers, we have been knowing that our Chalapati List of Pharmaceutical Centers having MOE with Maryland Eastern Shore University, Dr. Ann Dang, my friend and colleague, Associate Professor, Pharmacy Studies Department in Maryland. One more enthusiastic, passion towards career, Dr. Eman Gautami, going to join second session. Without much of time, I welcome Mopati Sopna, PharmD intern, to read the profile of Dr. Ann Dang. Thank you, Mopati Sopna. You're always awesome profile leader.
It's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. N. Dang, PharmD. Ma'am is currently working as an assistant professor of pharmacy practice and administration at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. Ma'am earned her doctorate of pharmacy from the University of the Sciences in Philadelphia and went on the pursue or postgraduate year one pharmacy residency at Temple University Hospital. Afterwards, she completed a specialized residency in ambulatory care at Temple University School of Pharmacy. Her practice sites are located at the three lower counties community services, a federally qualified health center in Princess Anne and Pocomoke, Maryland. Ma'am works under a collaborative practice agreement where she is able to provide care for the patients with a chronic disease state in the pharmacy primary care setting. She serves as a lead organizer for international medical missions at the School of Pharmacy and has organized missions to Haiti and Nicaragua. Ma'am has certifications in vaccination delivery and tobacco dependence and is a board member of Maryland Public Health Association. Ma'am research involvements include career development for the children and chronic disease state prevention with the health department and other non-profit organizations. Ma'am have a teaching experience around 11 years in the field of pharmacy. It was so awesome of you, ma'am. Thank you so much for your presence at another international conference by our college. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, Swapna. And Dang, yeah, please share your PPT, start your session. And requesting participants, if you have any doubts or any clarification, please yeah, unmute your audio and you can ask immediately. I hope you'll interact more and more today. Such a experience of faculty in pharmacy practice in front of you. Not only what are the current topic is the coronavirus pandemic in the United States, the lesson learned and its impact on the pharmacy profession. So your career oriented, so yeah, she can clarify you. Yeah, ma'am, go ahead. All the best.
Thank you. Can you hear and see me okay in my slides?
Yeah, everything is fine. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So first of all, thank you for having me to your conference. We're about 9.5 hours apart. So it's always a pleasure to come back to Chalapathy and present. Today for this conference, you know that coronavirus has been impacting the world. And I wanted to share the stories about what's been happening with the United States and have a discussion with you about how we're handling the pandemic compared to India. You probably heard by now that the United States has the most coronavirus cases and the highest number of deaths compared to any other country in the world. So the stories that I'm going to share, you know, the US is in no way means a good example of our response. We did things poorly, but there are some things that we did well. So for this presentation, I'm going to share you the stories about what went right, what went wrong, the history about the pandemic here in the United States, and kind of have an open discussion with you to share ideas about how to end the pandemic. So first is a little bit of history about coronavirus in the United States. So you know that in December, the government in Wuhan, China confirmed that they were treating pneumococcal cases, but this later turned to coronavirus cases that spreads to people in Asia and all across the world. And the World Health Organization on January 30th declares a global health emergency for COVID-19. In the United States, we're under the Trump administration. So a day later, the Trump administration suspends entry into the United States by any foreign nationals who travel to China. And during this time, the US was already seeing positive cases of coronavirus. On February 3rd, days later, we declare a public health emergency due to the outbreak. The announcement comes 3 days later after the World Health Organization declares a global health emergency as more than 10,000 cases of the virus and more than 200 deaths were confirmed worldwide. And on February 29th, we reported our first death in a patient near Seattle. This was what we believe the first death for coronavirus, but after this, it spreads to other states, including California. And now we're finding out that the first person who died of coronavirus may have died as early as January. So in March, the Centers for Disease Control lifts all federal restrictions on testing for coronavirus. So at this point, the Centers for Disease Control tried to create diagnostic tests, but there wasn't enough tests for coronavirus to go around, and the results were delayed for weeks. On March 13th, Trump officially declares a national emergency, and he said that he was going to send millions of dollars in federal funds to states to combat the epidemic. On March 13th, the Centers for Disease Control recommends that there be no more gatherings of 50 or more people in the United States, and this includes things like weddings, festivals, parades, concerts, and conferences. And during these times, the states began to close. So by March 25th, the United States officially became the country hit hardest by the pandemic, with over 81,000 infections and more than 1,000 deaths. So at this point, our cases were higher than China, Italy, or any other country at the time. On March 27th, Trump signs a $2 trillion stimulus bill to help with the pandemic. So this would give money to those unemployed by coronavirus, prevent evictions, for people paying rent and mortgage, and allow free COVID tests to support the healthcare system. On March 30th, most of the states in the United States issued everyone to stay at home, except for essential workers, this being people who worked at grocery stores, the healthcare professionals, and police officers. And in many states, there were curfews about who could go in and out of the home. On April 2nd, in just a few weeks, the pandemic put about 20 million Americans out of work, and the speed and scale of job losses was without precedent, as bad as the Great Depression. So on April 17th, Trump encourages protests of social distancing restrictions in some states because he wanted to reopen the economy. He encouraged people to fight the stay-at-home order and go to the streets to protest. And at this time, it was definitely not safe to do so. So on May 29th, the government confirmed that coronavirus was exceeding at an unprecedented rate. And at this point, it surpasses 100,000. And here, the death toll at this point was higher in the US compared to any other country in the world. On May 31st, there was a lot of protests in the United States against police violence against Black people. And these gatherings for protests led to new outbreaks. So by May 31st, there were protests in over 65 cities in the US. June 20th, in the southern states, they opened earlier without plans for testing and social distancing. So as a result, the cases rose in the South, like in Florida and South Carolina, and continued to rise in the South as well as the West of the United States. So by now, July 7th, the Trump administration notified the United Nations that the US was withdrawing from the World Health Organization in 2021, which would cut the World Health Organization, one of the biggest sources of aid with the US. On July 10th, the US rises again for coronavirus. It set single day records for the 7th time in 11 days, with records announced of positive cases and deaths. On August 8th, we see that Trump makes a stimulus bill after the original bill expires. So about this time, half of what was given out to unemployed workers to stop convictions, although people said that this wasn't enough to help people unemployed by coronavirus. And finally, by August 9th, what we're doing is we're bracing for a really bad winter. So there's the approach of the influenza season, and it's said to overwhelm hospitals swamped by COVID-19. So to reduce the pressure now, drug makers are making a lot of influenza vaccines, which is up about 10% compared to the year before, to help reduce the rates of influenza and COVID-19. So this is the current statistics of coronavirus in the United States. So right now there are more than 5 million cases of coronavirus patients that have been confirmed in the United States. And currently over 170,000 people have died. Right now it's estimated by September, there's going to be 200,000 deaths due to coronavirus in the US. So this is a chart of the positivity rates of coronavirus compared to the state. So in New York, that was the epicenter of the pandemic, but right now it's been surpassed by states like California, Texas, and Florida, which themselves have over 500,000 cases. So we're seeing rises and surge in the southern states and in the West. So this is a chart of the COVID-associated hospitalizations. So of course, laboratory confirmed COVID-19 hospitalizations are rising since March, and with it comes a rise in death rates. So the highest hospitalizations, if you see here in the red line, comes from adults age 65 and older, followed by, in the dark blue line, we see hospitalizations among adults age 50 to 64, followed by the light blue line, which is adults 18 to 49. And among the hospitalized patients with coronavirus, about 90% of them had at least one medical underlying infection. So for the adults, they're in the dark blue line, but most patients who were hospitalized had coronavirus with comorbidities like hypertension, obesity, and cardiovascular disease. In the light blue line, that's for pediatrics. So about 50% of pediatrics who were hospitalized had medical conditions, including things like obesity, asthma, and other neurological conditions. So one of the challenges that we faced in the healthcare system was inadequate screening and contact tracing. So China and the World Health Organization made their own tests, but in the US, the Centers for Disease Control developed its own test because they wanted to adapt the regulations to the American healthcare system. So from the start, there was a mass delay of making these tests and making it available to the public. And when the first tests were made, they had inconclusive results. So the US announced that to perform testing for coronavirus, you needed to get an authorization called an emergency use authorization. And at that time, only one site was able to get this authorization, which was the Centers for Disease Control. So only certain people were able to get tested only if they had positive symptoms. And when they got tested, the results would take days, if not weeks, to come back. So looking at this chart, you can see that in the US, we're in the red line, but we were testing in the beginning of 2.4 tests per million people a day in March compared to Korea, which is in the gray line. They were testing 155 million tests per million people. So you see that in a country like South Korea, it being significantly smaller, they were doing a much better job at testing compared to us. So there's two tests that are available for COVID-19. There's the antibody test that tells you if you have a past infection. So we really don't know right now if the protection that the antibodies offer lasts a long period of time. There's still research being done with that, but the most common test that we're doing right now is the viral test for COVID-19, which tells you if you have a current infection. So here you insert a cotton swab into the nasal cavity and you rotate it around 15 times to make sure that there's enough material in the nose to be collected. And then the swab is then inserted into the container and sent to the lab. So usually you're able to get these results in 10 minutes, but with the transport to the lab, right now we're not getting results until 2, 3, even up to 7 days. So there are still many delays with testing. We tried to implement contact tracing as well. So this was another barrier that we faced. So for COVID-19, contact tracing is becoming politicized because people feel like they're losing privacy and that there's a lot of distrust right now with the government. And we don't have a lot of funding to do this. So usually contact tracing occurs in a period of time where there's less people who travel less frequently. So typically when we were doing in this past, it had very small numbers. However, COVID-19 is completely different. So it's spread in all 50 states. And we're seeing that about 40% of transmission occurs before people get symptomatic. So patients who are pre-symptomatic or even asymptomatic can still spread the disease to others. And this is where contact tracing becomes really important. So right now we're having a lot of shortages, again, with testing, test material, as well as being able to do contact tracing for people who are sick. However, one of the benefits, one of the positive things that came out was that we had a lot of innovation this couple of months, one of which was the buildup of technology to help combat the virus. So we built contact tracing apps by corporations like Google and Apple. So what you do is you opt into the notification system, and there's an exposure notification system that will give you a random ID for your device. And your phone periodically checks all the random IDs associated with positive COVID-19 cases against your own list. And if there's a match, the app will notify you with instructions from your public health official on how to keep you and other people close around you safe. So another reason why the US isn't doing so well right now with coronavirus is that we don't have universal health care. So there's many efforts that have pushed against for universal health care. So a lot of people right now are insured or underinsured. So most of our health insurance is tied to employment. So if you lose a job, you'll lose your health insurance. So with the collapse of the economy, 1 out of 5 adults who said that they had a spouse or a partner who had health insurance through a job now becomes uninsured because the economy shuts and they lose their jobs. So without the health insurance, they weren't able to get any medical care even if they were sick. And there's also fear and distrust of the media. So generally, Americans give news outlets fairly high marks for coverage for COVID-19. However, some people think that there have been exaggerations about COVID-19 on the news. So misinformation is very common. About 48% of people think that they were exposed to made up information and news about the virus. So for example, they think that coronavirus was made in the lab, or that it's going to disappear over the summer, and maybe 5G internet systems spread the virus. So there's a lot of miscommunication and distrust out there, especially to healthcare professionals. So another thing that we're facing even now is that Americans don't like to wear masks. So wearing a mask right now is a political debate. So people right now don't think that wearing a mask is necessary in public. They think that COVID isn't real. You're going to get herd immunity without wearing a mask. And some states who really pushed for wearing a mask in public led to the gathering of protests seen in these pictures here about people saying that this is an infringement of their civil liberties and rights. And this mostly occurred in the southern states and in the West, where most of the coronavirus cases are surging right now. And of course, with the refusal of wearing a mask comes from the refusal of social distancing. So the Centers for Disease Control issued that you have to remain 6 feet apart. A lot of people ignore this, especially young people. Some people had house parties trying to invite others to get coronavirus as a joke. They had contests about who could get coronavirus the fastest. And we also, as I mentioned before, had a lot of protests in this time, protests about wearing a mask and police brutality. But during these protests, you could see in the pictures that not every single person was wearing a mask and social distancing, which again is causing the virus to spread very rapidly here in the US. There was a lot of confusion during the initial period because we have 50 states in the United States, and every single state has different rules on what to do for coronavirus. So I'm in Maryland, and 3 hours away from me is the state of New York. And you could see that even despite being 3 hours apart, we have completely different rules on whether or not it's safe to travel, whether or not you can gather in crowds, school closures, wearing a mask. So with that, because every single state had different rules and policies, it became really confusing to people who were traveling from state to state. So for example, some states allowed golf clubs and alcohol stores to open and other states did not. Some states made churches close, and people weren't happy about that. So this caused a lot of confusion for many people and the perception of unfairness. So right now, we're seeing a lot of disparities in healthcare, particularly among Black and Hispanic people, because they've been disproportionately affected by coronavirus. So now the statistics are if you are Black or Hispanic in the US, you're 3 times more likely to get coronavirus, and you're twice as likely to die because of coronavirus. So again, there's a lot of inequalities in health in these ethnic and racial groups. And it's because of disparities in healthcare, housing, the education system. So for example, these groups are more represented in essential workers for things like healthcare, farms, factories, grocery stores. And some of these people who work in these settings have more chances of being exposed to the virus and can't stay home if they get sick because they can't afford to. And a lot of them live in crowded conditions that make it a lot more challenging to follow prevention strategies. So of course, you know, all over the world, there was a shortage of personal protective equipment, especially masks at first. One of the things that the US did though was that it used some very innovative methods to overcome this shortage. So for example, they made 3D printing of face shields. They allowed pharmacies to compound alcohol and hand sanitizer to help overcome the personal protection equipment. And right now, I think we're doing a really good job with training our healthcare system. Right now, there's a rise in the medical literature and a lot of educational models from many healthcare organizations, from pharmacy to nursing to medical, to help train us medical professionals and the world, which is a great thing because, as you know, information about coronavirus pretty much changes from day to day. So I'm going to focus a little bit about pharmacy and how that's been impacted with coronavirus in the US. So pharmacy organizations in March, representing all the interests of pharmacists in the United States, issued a joint statement about having pharmacists fight the pandemic and giving them expanded roles. So first, they're really advocating for pharmacists to authorize test and treat. So here they're advocating that pharmacists can order, collect, and interpret tests, as well as initiate treatment for infectious disease. So this would also include being able to administer vaccines, especially when the coronavirus vaccine comes out. They're advocating that operational barriers address the workforce and workflow issues. So pharmacists and technicians with valid licenses should be able to operate across state lines, including telehealth, especially if there are shortages among pharmacies. Also, they wanted to address shortages and sustain continuity of care. So they wanted pharmacists to provide direct patient care, to conduct therapeutic interchange and substitution with physicians if there's any shortages that rise. So during the pandemic, of course, we had medication supplies that were missing. And with this, they wanted the pharmacists to work with the Food and Drug Administration to extend expiration dates in the events that drug shortages occur. And finally, of course, we're always advocating to reimburse for our services and remove barriers. So this would provide coverage for pharmacist services within their scope of practice. And this would allow people to have the removal of day supply restrictions from their copays, especially for life-sustaining medications, and remove any restrictions on home delivery for their medications. So pretty much pharmacy fields across the nation were negatively impacted with coronavirus. I'm going to talk about 3 sectors of pharmacy education and how they changed to meet the pandemic. So the first sector is how coronavirus impacted pharmacy education. So education definitely has been largely affected with the pandemic. We have the Accreditation Council of Pharmacy Education, and it's allowed for some changes in the pharmacy curriculum, especially with virtual instruction. So you know that most schools in the US were closed for in-person teaching. So before the pandemic, right from the start, we had the problem of decreasing pharmacy admissions worldwide. So we have 140 schools for pharmacy in the US, and students even before the pandemic weren't applying as much. So coronavirus hits and it makes the admission process much harder to do. So we had to do interviews and recruit students online, work on virtual marketing. All of our curriculum was online, and it made it hard for us to do things like simulation events, patient counseling, and many of our education sites didn't accept students for rotations, and they were delayed into going to the practice site. And finally, research pretty much was at a standstill because most of the universities and labs were closed. So we had online delivery of our classes. This is a picture of our main technology, which is Blackboard Collaborate that we use at the school. And with this technology, we teach the pharmacy students. So you were able to have polls and groups online, but we also use other technology platforms, including Zoom and Google Hangouts. So there were a lot of consequences in academia due to coronavirus. So first is that faculty had to learn best practices on teaching online. It's hard to engage students and make them attend class virtually, but we had educational seminars on how to do this. There was also a loss of income in the academy with less admissions, more money spent on resources to support COVID and online instruction, and of course, reimbursement for student housing. So at UMES, we lost about $8 million during the pandemic. There were delays in who could get examinations because a lot of sites closed and a lot of graduates couldn't sit for their licensing exam, which made it a lot harder for them to get a job, especially right out of graduation. And right now, because of the economic collapse, a lot of sites for pharmacists aren't hiring for jobs. As far as the impact in the community, we had the CDC guidelines for no contact pharmacy services, including not touching the patient's insurance card or personal items. And we also offered no contact delivery for prescriptions to the patient's home. So they encourage the use of the phone and electronic prescriptions and drive-throughs to reduce contact. And we tried to do 90-day refills to minimize that face-to-face contact. So we are seeing right now the rise of telemedicine. Many services for chronic care, especially primary care, are being done on the phone and video. There's a lot of companies right now investing money in telemedicine because many offices were closed during the pandemic. Pharmacists right now are offering their right to refuse dispensing, especially for illegitimate medications, for example, hydroxychloroquine, that we know right now doesn't work. A lot of pharmacists, too, with the supply of alcohol sanitizers being limited, made their own. And they were first responders, so they turned their sites into drive-throughs where you could test for COVID-19, as well as immunize people for flu vaccine, and they will when the COVID-19 vaccine comes out. So this is some of the pictures of pharmacists in the community. You see pharmacists getting gowned up, giving immunizations, and implementing the no contact guidelines. And as far as the hospital pharmacy, right now, no patients are allowed to visit the hospital because they don't want any contact with the sick. It's pretty sad because some people in the hospital who have coronavirus can't have any visitors and they often die alone. To enter the hospital, we have staff screening protocols. So you need to wear a mask, you need to get a temperature check. And there have been a lot of drug shortages, such as things like remdesivir, albuterol that we had to deal with. So most hospitals worked with pharmacists, nursing, physicians, and made their own treatment guidelines about how to treat coronavirus patients. And they share these guidelines with different hospitals. And most pharmacies right now are becoming centralized. So they stay in one location to minimize contact, and certain technicians would deliver the medications to the floor at specific times. So hospitals too are losing a lot of money. They had to close a lot of units and surgeries to make room for the coronavirus patients. Luckily, there is some federal aid to support the hospitals. As I mentioned before, there's an expansion of telemedicine, especially for COVID patients after discharge to check on their health status. Some hospitals also operated as call centers to answer any questions from the public and operated surge units for overflow to house coronavirus patients. There's a lot of research right now about how well patients do on remdesivir that's leading to publications, as well as research on serological antibody tests in healthcare professionals to see how long the antibodies last, but a lot of hospitals are generating their own research. And right now we're still operating under a surge crisis where most of the beds, especially the ICUs, the intensive care units, are filled right now. So if the coronavirus cases worsens, we might not have enough hospital beds for all these patients. So these are some pictures of hospital pharmacists on the front line. They're helping to test positive patients, as well as some of the hospital surge units, because right now we don't have a lot of room left in the hospitals. So we'll focus our last slide set on how treatment and prevention is being done here in the US. So right now there's a lot of research and opportunities with drug development. Usually it takes about 10 years to bring a drug to market, and now we're seeing drugs developed at a very rapid pace. So the FDA issued something called the Coronavirus Treatment Acceleration Program to get patients new treatment for COVID as soon as possible. So right now we have over 570 drug development programs and over 270 clinical trials on coronavirus underway, but still we don't have an FDA drug or treatment yet for COVID-19. We're also seeing a lot of repurposed drugs, so drugs that are used for different things now, trying to be used for the treatment of coronavirus. But you have to be careful too, because we're also seeing a drug of misinformation. So there's a lot of fraudulent data where people are marketing drugs that might be safe and effective for coronavirus, but they're actually not. So there's an entire website about fraudulent claims for medications, including essential oils, umbilical cord stem cells, and it's all found on the FDA website. So in terms of treatment, there's many drug categories that are currently being tested to treat coronavirus. We have antivirals to keep viruses from multiplying, cell therapy products, including immunotherapies and stem cells, immunomodulators, which change the body's immune response, neutralizing antibodies that contain antibodies to help patients fight the virus, as well as other therapies. So the diversity of the therapeutic approaches being investigated is really important because it expands our understanding of different categories of treatment. So we use the National Institutes of Health guidelines for how to treat patients with coronavirus. And in their guidelines, they divide treatment based on 3 categories. So right now, there's only 2 drugs that they recommend for coronavirus, which is remdesivir and dexamethasone. The second category in the middle is drugs where there is insufficient evidence, so they don't have enough data for a recommendation. And the last category at the end is recommends against. So these drugs have safety or efficacy concerns and they don't recommend using this. However, in practice, coronavirus treatment is a clinical decision. So if you fail the recommended category, or maybe you're not a candidate, there are patients that go on to these other categories, depending on their risk versus benefit. So the number 1 drug that we are using right now is remdesivir. So this was originally used to treat Ebola, and it was first founded because they thought that it was active against the same family of coronavirus, and that family shared a lot of similarities. So the guidelines on who gets remdesivir have been updated because there's a shortage right now for remdesivir. So this is only given to patients who have severe disease and are hospitalized. And severe disease is if you have a low oxygen saturation of less than 94% on room air, if you're needing supplemental oxygen, or if you're on ventilation or ECMO. So the dose is listed there, but with the course of therapy and the shortage, it does become very expensive. So we think remdesivir works because it's a nucleotide analog prodrug that inhibits viral replication by blocking RNA polymerase. And in the original animal studies, remdesivir inoculated with the MERS family reduced lung levels of the virus and lung damage. So this was how it first came to use. As well as the studies, so the biggest studies showing that remdesivir worked was the ACTT1 study group by the New England Journal of Medicine. So here they tested whether remdesivir versus placebo works, and it was a randomized placebo-controlled trial. But in the study, they found out that in the remdesivir group, they had better recovery time, 11 days versus 15 days for placebo. And the mortality rates were better with remdesivir, so 7.1% versus 12% for placebo. So a lot of warnings with remdesivir, hypersensitivity reactions, including allergic reactions. If you have this, you can slow down the infusion rate. There's also transaminase elevations. So don't start remdesivir if your liver enzymes are greater than 5 times the upper limit of normal. And it doesn't work if you administer it with chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine. So you have to avoid the combination. And among pregnant women, there's really no data. So monitor the renal function, the hepatic function, chemistries, as well as hematological principles when starting and continuing remdesivir, but it is usually a 5-day supply. And right now, Gilead, which is the makers of remdesivir, are selling it to a single US distributor, which then sells the product to hospitals identified by the government. So the Department of Health and Human Services works with the state and US territories to identify the hospitals that are eligible to get remdesivir twice a month. They think that by the end of September, the supplies will have been high enough so that they can transition this to a traditional supply chain. But you could see that a cost per vial is $400. So for a 5-day course, this is about $3,000 on the system, which I already told you before that hospitals are losing a lot of money in the pandemic. So we're not sure if this is even sustainable without any government assistance. So another drug recommended in the guidelines is dexamethasone. So this is a steroid, and the guidelines recommend it for patients also with severe disease. So patients who are mechanically ventilated, who require oxygen, or are hospitalized with severe illness. And the side effects are those of steroids, but it can affect pretty much every organ in your body. So dexamethasone, the usage was started through the recovery trial, another trial in New England Journal of Medicine, which was a randomized controlled trial between dexamethasone and placebo. But they found out that in patients requiring mechanical ventilation, the dexamethasone group had less incidence of death compared to placebo, which is when we first started to use this. Now in the US, we have a dexamethasone shortage because everybody's getting this drug if they have COVID. So the FDA is recommending that you can use another steroid if you don't have it. And the guidelines recommend against the use of hydroxychloroquine. So this is a pretty infamous drug, but you probably heard Donald Trump saying that this drug would be a game changer in the pandemic. And he openly encouraged people to take this, whether or not they were positive for coronavirus. And this also led to drug shortages to patients who actually needed it for things like lupus or rheumatoid arthritis. But since then, the FDA said that you shouldn't use this drug because there's a lot of cardiovascular side effects. So arrhythmias, QT prolongation, and you really shouldn't use this unless you're in a clinical trial. So this is a slide showing all the side effects of hydroxychloroquine. It could cause eye disorders, but of course, the cardiovascular toxicities, the QT prolongation, and arrhythmias are the main reasons why the guidelines recommend against using hydroxychloroquine for COVID. And some of the studies show that hydroxychloroquine just doesn't work. For example, New England Journal of Medicine said that hydroxychloroquine had no difference compared to placebo. The World Health Organization's Solidarity trial, as well as the recovery trials, showed that there was no reduction in mortality, and actually the trials ended early because this drug didn't do any difference compared to placebo. And finally, I'll end with vaccines for coronavirus. So right now we are in a race to find the vaccine first. There's a lot of diversity on the technology platforms. All the vaccines try to expose the body to an antigen that won't cause disease, but it's designed to provoke an immune response if a person becomes infected with that antigen. So one of the striking features of vaccine development is just the range of technology platforms that we have, from things like viral vaccines, viral vectors, protein, and nucleic acid-based ones. But among the common ones that we're developing are the virus vaccines, so giving the virus in a weakened or inactivated form. We already have vaccines that are built this way, for example, measles and polio, but this does require a lot of safety testing. We have viral vector vaccines. So here, viruses like measles or adenovirus, they're genetically engineered so that they can produce coronavirus proteins in the body. And the viruses are weakened so that they can't cause disease. For nucleic acid vaccines, they're giving genetic instruction in the form of DNA or RNA for coronavirus to make an immune response. So the nucleic acid is inserted into human cells, which then makes the virus protein. And finally, protein-based vaccines. Not a lot of vaccines built in this way, but here we're using fragments protein or protein shells that mimic the coronavirus's outer coats to produce that immune response. So right now, researchers around the world are developing more than 165 vaccines against the coronavirus, over 30 of which are in the clinical trials in humans. So usually this requires years and years of testing, but right now we're trying to have a race on who finds the most safe and effective vaccine first. And just taking a look at the vaccines that are in the latter stages. So we actually have 2 vaccines that are already approved, one in China and one in Russia. During the pandemic, a vaccine can get emergency use authorization before getting formal approval. But once the vaccine is licensed, researchers do continue to monitor people who receive it just to make sure that it's safe and effective. But here in the US, the one with Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and Moderna are the vaccines that are in the combined phases or phase 3 that we think have the most potential to be marketed as early as the end of this year for a safe and effective vaccine. So here, in terms of vaccine development, it's usually a long and lengthy process, and it usually takes multiple candidates and many years to make a vaccine because of the high costs and failure rates. Typically, developers follow a linear process to make sure that their vaccine is safe and effective. However, with the new pandemic, there's many steps that occur in parallel to have more faster, safer results. but at the same time, this poses a lot of financial risk to the manufacturer. So for example, you could have phase 1 clinical trials in combination together with animal testing models. So early manufacturing scale up before establishment of clinical safe and effective is what's being done right now in the US. And again, it does pose a lot of financial risk, especially if we find out later on that the vaccine doesn't work. And finally, for our vaccines, what we're testing, we're seeing that it only requires about 1 or 2 doses for immunity. There's very little side effects. And we are having a lot of challenges with conducting clinical trials. It's difficult to predict where the outbreaks are going to occur and prepare the clinical trials for vaccine readiness and testing. It's also important not to crowd or overburden sites with multiple trials. So in terms of research, there's also the demand for vaccines. So in terms of studies, you're going to need to see which population is at higher risk for coronavirus once the vaccine becomes available, because that could be the basis of establishing a fair vaccine allocation system. And that was my presentation. Thank you so much for your attention. Hopefully this discussion gave you some ideas, some insights. Again, I don't say that US was the lead in taking control of the pandemic. You heard our failures. You heard some of our successes as well. But hopefully this is a conversation to exchange ideas and hopefully end this pandemic.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Really, it's a wonderful session. You have taken last 4 months back where Corona started, where Corona is ending now. So I hope the participants, the delegates, is ready to ask, interact with ma'am. Yeah, it's time for participants. Please unmute your mic and interact with ma'am.
I think it's kind of interesting how, I think that I've heard of reinfection in Hong Kong. So it's quite interesting how the immunity is quite short-lived. So I would imagine the fight is going to be long and hard.
Yes, so we're doing antibody testing for research, and we're finding that for people infected with coronavirus, the antibodies don't last long, maybe a couple of weeks, at the most 3 months. So if we do become infected, it's possible for people to become infected twice with coronavirus. So the antibody test might not be a good way to measure whether or not you're really immune.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Gautami, joining us.
No problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, participants.
Thank you. That was a great presentation, by the way. Really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yeah, participants. You can unmute your mic. Yeah, I have one question. How did you manage in COVID?
Yes, so I work in 2 sectors. I work in ambulatory care and I work on the hospital side. So in ambulatory care, I do primary care, and for 2-3 months, all the primary care sites were closed. There was no face-to-face contact with most places because they wanted to decrease transmission. So for me, a lot of my practice moved to virtual telehealth. So we called patients and manage their diabetes, their hypertension that way. We did video conferencing. So I think that a lot of healthcare centers are definitely moving to telehealth after this.
Okay.
Among the hospital side, a lot of surgeries and units closed, but they were all converted to coronavirus centers. So at one point, the hospital that I worked at was operating at 80% capacity, and all of the patients were coronavirus patients. So we had a lot of drug shortages to simple things like albuterol. And with them, the patients were really sick. These patients were intubated. And usually when patients make it that far, their chance of survival really isn't good. So we had a lot of deaths initially in the hospital, but right now, I think it's getting a little bit better. Right now, we only have about 10% occupancy in the hospital, but we're all bracing for the fall because I think that in the next couple of months, it's just going to get worse again, especially right now because people are getting very lax with the masks and not socially distant principles.
We do hope. We do hope. Yeah. Can you stop share screen? Can you stop share screen? So you'll be on screen. There is share screen. Yeah. So yeah, it's fine. Dan, one more question is means even I've been there in hospital and my students are working in hospital. Even it's non-COVID ward, but along with COVID and non-COVID together we are working. But even some students are exposed, they have treated well. So have you suggested any medicines oftenly means to manage the symptoms?
Okay. So right now, in terms of medications, even the ones that are in the guidelines, remdesivir and dexamethasone that I mentioned, I personally don't think that it's doing that much for our COVID patients, just because, especially in the hospital, when these patients are intubated, again, it's a very high mortality risk. So I don't necessarily think that remdesivir is working that great. So a lot of it, the physicians are just doing what they can. They're given immunoglobulins, they're given convalescent plasma. It's a lot of experimentation at this point, especially because we do have patients that fail from remdesivir and dexamethasone. In the outpatient setting, for patients that don't aren't admitted to the hospital and are tested with coronavirus, are tested positive, we do tell them to take vitamin C, to take zinc, but the evidence actually shows that there's little efficacy in doing this, but we do tell our patients maybe it'll support the immune system. So there's a lot of ifs. We're not completely sure.
Yes.
This is that one situation where it's all about risk versus benefit and clinical judgment, because I think right now, until we get the vaccine, we're kind of at a standstill. I don't think our treatment is that great.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, in my experience, I have treated more than 10 to 15 patients through phone. So the patients, usually people will complain with my fever and body pains, headache, and motions. So I have gone through so many articles and going through WHO profiles. I have suggested to take azithromycin 3 to 5 days initially. Along with that, if they have fever, high grade fever, they have to take Dolo 650, that is acetaminophen 650 mg, and followed by what you said is ginkgo, means the multiple vitamins, vitamin supplements, and vitamin C. Some cases, if the patient is, I have got one patient is more than 60 years. He has some diabetes complication. I have given dexamethasone 6 mg. So 3 days, and sometimes I have given amoxiclav. The people who have some coughing and some sputum complications have given amoxiclav 625 mg. So 3 to 5 days. Mostly they have recovered by 5 days. So all symptoms subsided within 5 days. And I means I've been telling the more aged group people, they have to keep on observing with PO2 levels. It should maintain by 97. So means yeah, as a pharmacologist, I can suggest such a extent. But when the PO2 levels are coming down 94, 92, so I suggest to them to join in our hospital so that I can give, like, we can provide oxygen and the ventilator facilities available. So, but even the most of Indian scenario is a huge population. The people realized, understood through media and so social media, all these means TV, all these things made them well knowledge on Corona. They have saved themselves, but even some people not witnessed their symptoms and they took into their life end. So there are some death cases, or even young people also they lead to death. The reason is not identified, not started treatment early. So I have seen some young people also so lead to death. So means most of people manage at home quarantine, they have managed because all hospitals are filled, and private sector they are charging more per day 30,000. They are charging. It's very expensive.
Yes.
So they are managed very well. So such a way, I think in my observation, my hospital, so it was filled more than 500 beds along with my so around my department. There are 500 beds occupied by COVID patients, symptomatic or asymptomatic, who are panic, non-panic. So whoever feel cough, they will come and join. They don't think that whether this normal cough or COVID cough. So,
Mhm.
but we can't say don't join. So like that they are joined. But my conclusion is at after months I've been watching from March, April, May, June, July, August. So I don't think so. No COVID now in Andhra Pradesh, especially. So people still panic and they're not coming out. It's already the randomization sample already taken by some official healthcare department. The half of the people it has reached and they have developed the immunities and it's went away. So I'm requesting through this Zoom. So please come out and face Corona and so face Corona. Yeah, obviously, how long we'll be in quiet and not doing our duties. So still, even family students are still there in panic. What parents are saying. So without these people, who will work for them? Who will work for the patients? So my suggestion is that no Corona. So you have to come out. You have to develop your immunity. Have 2 eggs, chicken, good food, good sleep. Obviously, it will develop immunity. There is medicine. I treated myself. So even I exposed so many times. I got headache. I got fever. Myself, I took treatment and I managed self quarantine. But manage. But if I say I'm positive, means no one come to my home. No one treat me. Okay, it's they did differently. It's quite happening in India. Means once the person is positive, means they think that okay, this one is quite different than others.
Mhm.
So that's the thing happened in India. That's the experience faced last 4 months.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Mona,
It's a really an awesome experience that you explain everything from the safety to the treatment. Entire is covered within a single session. It's a very short span too. But I have a challenge while I'm auditing the prescription in the general medicine. So here, when the patient is infected with the COVID-19, and what is the rationality of using AC inhibitors or ARBs in that patient? Were there any controversies of using AC inhibitors or ARBs in the patient?
Yeah. So, at least for us, it's in the guidelines that you should not use. There's no evidence that ACE inhibitors are better or worse than anything else for coronavirus treatment. I know that in the beginning they were mentioning treatments like ACE inhibitors, ARBs, NSAIDs, all these different drugs, even proton pump inhibitors. But they say that there's insufficient evidence right now to either recommend for or against these drugs. They don't have any effect for coronavirus. Are you using that in India?
Yes,
Because we don't use it at all.
cardiology, general medicine, they were using. So in the two departments, being treated for the same patient or the same patient infected with the coronavirus. So they are following different protocols in the treatment. That's why I got confused with seeing those prescriptions, and I want to clarify myself.
Mhm. Yeah, no, we don't use that at all in the US. In the beginning, there were news and reports about that, but because the clinical trials were so few and far between, we don't have enough evidence to support it. So we currently, it's definitely not a popular therapy.
Morning, Ms. Dan.
Yes, hello. Hello again.
Yes, how are you? I hope that you are fine. It's a pleasure to have you again associate with the Chalapati Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences. I'm thanking you. I would like to ask one question that, as we all know, Trump, he decided to withdraw from the WHO, and how the impact is there. Do you feel any impact on US health system because of his decision? Are really the WHO having any impact because Trump said that he's going to close all his fund to WHO, and what is the impact on it? Do you feel any impact on your health system?
Yes, because in the beginning, especially with developing the test, the US healthcare system was working with the World Health Organization to use their model to make our own tests. Also, our infectious disease experts regularly talk to the World Health Organization to see what the outbreak trends are and if there's any new treatments, anything that they could provide to help us decrease the number of cases that we're having. I'm definitely not a fan of President Trump. I don't support what he's doing right now in this pandemic at all. And I think that right now we're not seeing an impact that much because he's not going to withdraw us from the World Health Organization until July of 2021. So that is when the deal is going to be sealed. But we might have a different president by then, hopefully, who will reestablish us with the World Health Organization, which I think is a good thing. Right now with the pandemic, we have so many different countries and everybody's doing a little something different. But because we need all this information to help us, save more lives, I think that there really needs to be more information, more collaboration with the World Health Organization, as well as people across the world to just end this pandemic.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, participants. Yeah, it's time for participants. Yeah, one more speaker, Dr. Gautami, is waiting for us. Yeah, Dang, what is the normal cost in the US per day? How much they charge? Is it free
For
of cost?
hospitalization?
Yeah, for COVID hospital means the person has any mild symptoms or moderate symptoms. So how
Okay.
they treat? What is the common charges? It will be quite obviously it will be expensive. So is it bearable to the common man?
So usually for a day of hospitalizations, especially because most of these patients end up in the intensive care unit, we're looking at for their care, their meds, about 10,000 a day. But of course, these patients stay there for at least a week, if not 2 weeks. Now there is some federal aid helping the hospitals. I know that the hospital that I worked at, we lost 3 million every single month since March. But there are some federal laws right now that is helping reimburse the hospitals, but that is not going to be enough. And we're worried that, especially when influenza season hits, there's going to be a surge of patients in the hospital during a time where this federal money will be gone. So we're not really sure about how to do that. Also, some of the drugs right now are subsidized by the government. So remdesivir, That costs about $3,000 for 5 days, but the government is giving that to us until September. After September, we have to get it ourselves. And again, nobody really knows what to do because of that. So there's a lot of unknowns.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yeah, participants, shall I expect any question from delegates? Shiv Bharat, Mohana, Monica, Swati. Swati Sri, why don't you unmute and interact? Dang is unable to reach our India, but even in COVID, she came to online. She's in front of you. If we talk, just you can ask what is the situation in the US. Monica. Yeah, without wasting your time, I think your time, I think it's 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock. What is your time
12
now?
o'clock. 12:20.
Oh, so sure. I'm making a lot of trouble to you.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I go to bed.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, I'm expecting you in future in this 2020. I think it's going to end it now. It is in August, not more than 3 months. In 2021, surely I'm expecting you for future sessions.
Yes, our faculty and our students, thank you for hosting our students in February. They said that that was a lovely, one of the best experiences they had in pharmacy school.
Yes.
So we're looking forward to continuing the student exchange. I know that a lot of faculty wanted to come to your institution to see it. I definitely want to come back and do more collaborations with you. And I'm hoping 2021 will be better.
Yes. Yeah, I'm very thankful to our college and my principal, Professor Ramaran Nadanla, Management, Sri Vaivang Garu, and my dear students. Very thankful to you, madam, for accepting our invitation. So spending, even it's night time, you're spending your valuable time with us. Even in COVID pandemic, you have shared your view on Corona, and you have given even what is the pharmacy education scenario in current scenario. Thank you very much, madam. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe and healthy. Bye.
Bye. Yes, Dr. Gautami, how are you?
I'm doing very well, sir. How are you? It's nice to see some familiar faces.
Yes, yes, we are excited. My student on screen. Madam.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see Shamila madam as well. Hope everyone is doing well.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. That's great to hear.
We feel proud. My student is studying in Toronto, Canada. That team was IAS, but even she came to Les Pharmacy and she is working to the healthcare profession. Yeah. Even Gautami, don't feel that just a small profile of you. That Sapna Mopat is going to read a profile. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Sure. Thank you.
Good morning. So it's my privilege to introduce our beloved senior who is going to take the session for next coming hours. So here I will introduce Dr. Gautami Imani. Ma'am completed her PharmD at Chalapati Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences and had opportunity to work at Fortis Hospital, Mumbai through our internship program. And she is inspired to learn more about use of technology in healthcare after working at Fortis. She decided to pursue Masters in Health Informatics and applied to University of Toronto Health Informatics program. The program enabled ma'am to weave her informatics and clinical knowledge together and make meaningful contributions to the company that offered her practicum. She continues to work at the same company today as clinical knowledge translation associate. So here, ma'am is going to take the session in the now. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for being with us today.
No problem. Thank you for introducing me. Okay, so before we get into this presentation, this presentation is probably very different from the first presentation. So I'm not actually going to talk about COVID. Um, so when Rama Rao said Emanarante, just give them a presentation that's going to be useful. And that's what I have, useful for the future. So that's what I've tried to do here. Um, so yeah, I mean the presentation itself, I am going to talk about what are some opportunities that are out there if you want to pursue a career in Canada, right? So that is going to be the focus of this presentation. So before we sort of get into it, I would like to give you a bit of a background as to what some things were that helped me get this job and what some things were that also helped me get into this master's program. So I would say there were two things. The first one being the theses in our 5th year of PharmD, as you can probably imagine. That is actually very important. Why? Because the education system here is completely different from what we are used to. So back home in India, what we have are exams, right? So that's what we are completely used to. But over here, you have assignments where you essentially look at 20 or 30 pages of material and then you have to write a 2-pager on what you've understood from that 20-page material. So just to give you an example, and I think for me, I put a lot of effort into my thesis work, and that has helped me a lot during my assignments. Just writing out my assignments, it was so helpful. Just the thesis experience helped me a lot. So I think that was one thing. And there are other things that the thesis helped me with, which I will talk about during the course of this presentation. The other thing that has helped me was certainly the internship opportunity at 40. So I'll tell you something. So మనం ఇప్పుడు public hospital పనిచేస్తున్నాం కదా. And as you know, public hospitals in India, they're very stretched. So you basically have like one single doctor looking at, I don't know, 100 patients. It's just very stretched. They're stretched very thin and they don't have the capacity to teach you. They don't even have the capacity to teach medical students something. So you can probably imagine that they would not have the capacity to teach pharmacy students. Probably nothing. Um, and the other thing is public hospitals in India, we still follow a paper-based system where, patient records and everything, they're in actual paper. But going to 40s, what I realized was, there's something called electronic medical record systems out there. So we do learn about CPOE or EMRs in college, right? I think it was one of our courses. I can't remember which course it was. But to actually see it with my own eyes, I could definitely see what was happening with my own eyes once I got to 40s, because they were using electronic medical systems, they were using CPOE. So it was definitely a great experience. And also the fact that it was a corporate hospital meant that the physicians and everyone else over there pays you more attention. So if you have any suggestions as to, oh, this drug is probably not right, maybe you should consider a dosage adjustment. In the public hospital, in GGH, you'll probably be ticked off. You'll be like, oh, who are you telling me what to do, right? But then if you go to 40s, then they might take you up just a touch more seriously if you put in proper amounts of effort. So for me, double I think I paid about 50K. Maybe I'm being too candid, but I'm just telling you what the situation was. So I paid about 50, 60K, I think. But it was a really great experience for me because I used that experience when I was doing my assignments. Most of my assignments were based on the information that I gathered from working at 40s. So I extrapolated that information to work on my assignments. So I think those are two things that you can probably, concentrate a bit more. I'm not sure what year you would be in. Like, I'm just looking at you because you're right there. Are you in 6th year right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, so maybe this is probably more useful for someone below you then, who is probably in their fifth year or something. But there are certainly some things which are definitely useful for you guys moving forward. Okay, so I'm just gonna get right into it. So how does someone become a pharmacist in Canada as an international student? Right, so you obviously know there's the PEBC exam, which is kind of like NAPLEX, which is, yeah, it's kind of equivalent to what a NAPLEX would be in America. So you have to write the PEBC exam, which has different sorts of levels. So it has level 1, level 2. I think that's pretty much it. But I would like to suggest that you go and look at this website, which is super comprehensive. I'm going to share this presentation with you guys as well so that you can explore the links that are in this presentation. So it's called the Pharmacist Gateway Canada something, but I don't know what the website name is called, but it's called the Pharmacist Gateway. So what it has is it's so amazingly comprehensive. It has everything that you would need to know if you want to become a practicing pharmacist in Canada. So it has details about what each province would need. So if you look at this, if you want to become a pharmacist in Saskatchewan, then what do you need to do? So it's essentially laid out in such an easy to understand manner. So if you look at this in Saskatchewan, for example, there is no bridging program. So it's a bridging program in the sense that you don't have to take, I don't know, 6 months of a course or something to. So what happens is, so in Ontario, you have to complete this bridging program, which essentially means you have to pay about $13,650 and study at University of Toronto for about 6 months. If you only pass PEBC level 1, then you have to enroll in this bridging program so that you gain more pharmacy knowledge, and that's how you become a pharmacist. But then in Saskatchewan, you don't really have to do a bridging program. So essentially, each province has their own requirements as to what should be done if you want to become a pharmacist. And I really, really like that website. I am not going to take the exam anytime soon, but if I ever want to, that's definitely a place where I'm going to start. Okay. Does that make sense? So feel free to interject me if you guys have any questions. Just pop into the chat and just type your question out. It's I can definitely take a look, and yeah, feel free to interject. No problem. So I would say there are about 3 provinces that require you to take a bridging program. So it's Ontario, Alberta, and I believe British Columbia. So I think these are probably the 3 provinces that require you to take a bridging program if you don't manage to pass all levels of PEBC, right? So that is what you need to do if you want to become a pharmacist. But if you want to become a hospital pharmacist, so a hospital pharmacist is equivalent to the term clinical pharmacist, which we use, right? So when I talk about hospital pharmacist, it means a pharmacist who is practicing pharmacy in the hospital. So that's your clinical pharmacist. So if you want to become a hospital pharmacist, then the process becomes more extensive. So in addition to having a PEBC, in addition to passing the PEBC exam and having a license, you also need to register for a residency program. And there are only a couple of residency programs. So you have about, I don't know, 2,000 residency seats, and you have about 2 lakh people fighting for those 2,000 seats, right? So it's a very competitive program. To get into a residency is such a complicated and exhaustive process. But you get paid supremely well. So a lot of pharmacists that I work with in my company have done residencies, and they do work twice a week at a hospital, and they get paid a lot. So it's definitely a long process, but it is very rewarding if you manage to get into it. So yeah, so for residency, what you have to do is you have to apply for a residency program through a software, through a website. It's called France. It's called the Pharmacy Residency and Matching Service, as you can see. And they're gonna interview you. So it's kind of like, I don't know, a proper position, and you would get paid 50,000. If you get into this program, you would get paid 50,000. The hospital is actually going to pay you. So for an year, they're going to pay you, I think, 50 to 60,000, depending on the program that you choose, if you get into it. Okay. And I think someone had a question about how to become a physician assistant in Canada as an international student as well. I think it was Gayatri. I don't remember, but I think someone did have a question. So the thing is, unless you're a Canadian citizen, it's very hard to become a physician assistant in Canada right away, but there are certain things that you can do. So you can either become a Canadian citizen or have a permanent residency, PR, as you would call it, and then apply to a Canadian program. So there are about 3 or 4 programs that offer physician assistant. That offer physician assistants. I don't know. Yeah, physician assistant programs in Canada. I think University of Toronto is one, University of British Columbia is one, and a couple more. But if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to wait for your PR, then what you can do is you can go to an American school as an international student, get certified for PA over there, and then you can actually practice in Canada or the US. So that is something that you can look into if physician assistant is something that you're interested in. And a physician assistant, it does pay certainly well. So I would definitely say it's something that you can look into. But the only problem, I guess, is if you are graduating from an American school, what that means is you need to apply for a separate visa. So let's say I got a PA license. I applied for a PA program in America. I got through the whole thing. I have to apply for a visa for a temporary work permit in Canada. And then I would be eligible to start looking for jobs. So the visa component is an additional part that you would have to look into if you opt for this. Does that make sense? I need you to respond because I'm only looking at you. Okay. Yeah. So I do have a list of PA programs that accept international students in the USA down there. So like I said before, I'm going to share this presentation with you guys so you can have a look at it.
Small request, Gautami.
Yes.
Yeah, participants, I have unmuted you. So you have permission. So you can unmute and you can interact with lab.
Yeah, feel free to interject. Don't worry about it.
That is, here is our senior and our student. So our Guntur.
Yeah.
So please open. Feel free to ask questions. Otherwise, the Gautam is like a metro fast. So if you
I talk very fast. So I would like it if you can just interject me and be like, hey, just stop. Just ask me a couple of questions. I am.
Then
I don't mind that at all.
Like anything, it gives exact information what happening in Canada. How can you reach yourself? So means even the COVID made us gap, but the most of last batch students, more than 10 students have been waiting. So even if you have hope for planning your career abroad, so she guides you better. So please unmute your mic and interact with her. You can interrupt her if she doesn't feel anything. You can interrupt her and you can communicate. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, well said, sir. Yeah, absolutely. So those are my sentiments as well. If you have any questions, just feel free to stop me. Okay. All right. So yeah, so this is essentially what it means if you want to be a physician assistant. So the underlines, I don't know if you can see them, but this is what the process would be. So once you have completed training from an American trained PA from accredited program, then you would join the Canadian Association for Physician Assistants as a regular member. And then you would apply to write an exam, which is actually, well, once you graduate, the exam is apparently very easy. So it's not as hard as, I don't know, PBC, right? So it's apparently kind of easy. So you study for that exam, you write it, and then once you're successful, you are certified to work as a Canadian physician assistant. But like I said, you do need a visa after that to come and look for jobs.
How long does it take?
So I'm not as well prepared for this presentation as I should be because I've been very caught up with work. But let's say the program takes about 2 years, then maybe 2.5, 3. Maybe that's a good estimate for this. Yeah. And I mean, I applied for my visa, for my work visa back in February, but then I just got it very recently because of COVID. But I would become much faster once COVID is once we're kind of done with COVID. Yeah. So next, I would like to talk a bit about health informatics. So that is what I did. That was my program. So full disclosure, before going into this program, I had zero idea what health informatics means. So it's kind of like, there's a saying, it's called just follow the sheep or something. So it's kind of like I had a couple of people in my class who were looking into this program, and I thought, okay, why not just do that? So that's exactly what I did. I did not look into this program. I was not interested in. All I knew was I just wanted to get out of. I just wanted to get more opportunities, and I thought just getting out of the country might be a good start. So that was very selfish of me, but that was my reasoning, right? So, and I applied to a couple of programs, but and fortunately, I managed to get into U of T, and U of T is like a really good school, so I immediately took it, and I think the program has certainly opened a lot of doors for me. I don't know how much the education has helped me because some courses they did require me to work very hard, but then I'm not sure if every single course in that program has helped me. But I think what the program certainly did was because it had an internship component, I got introduced to a lot of people, and it opened the doors for me, like in a sense that I got to know a lot of people, and I know now that if I ever want a job, where to look. So that is something. Shalini has a question. Go ahead. Are you typing, Shalini? How do I? Okay, this is my first time using Zoom. How do I go back in? Okay. Okay.
What, ma?
Malli ella sir. No. Okay. Okay.
Stop share kodu.
Okay. Okay. I think we're in control now.
It's fine, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe you can ask your question at the end of it.
Yeah, even the participant cannot, if you are unable to ask, you can chat also. There is chat option. Chat option is there. You can text message. She can see and she can reply you.
Yeah, absolutely. I can do that. And if I cannot, then she can help me with this. Right? Yeah.
Chat option is there. Please use that if you are unable to communicate directly.
Yeah,
So such a facility
absolutely.
are providing, you have to understand. So sitting at home and providing internet by your parents, just you need to start talk to your senior. So being faculty, what extent, being college or principal, so what extent we can provide you facilities like this. You have to understand, you have to interact, you have to upgrade, understand. So please understand and interact with ma'am and clarify yourself. Never depress yourself. But the COVID made us something like that. But please understand, situation is comes and goes. Never always, never be happy. So there will be some obstacles will come. So that's why she's an enthusiastic girl. I know. So she's a dare girl. She can take any time. If I ask class also, go to me, sir. I'll take directly. She will tell. So such a enthusiastic girl in front of you. Please communicate to Gautami and please interact. Ask your feel free to ask questions. Okay. Thank you.
Even though it is pandemic, you are lifting up with these golden beads right now, sir, from our college.
Yeah, means I know that I know how my students are in such a position. So from first batch to this batch, we are in different areas, different globally. Our family students are there, but we want to see. So generation, this small gap happened, but by welcoming like these people, they can motivate our students. They can pull our student. So I can see their smiles and their face in future. So again, those people will come back and they will motivate their juniors. So it is a mandatory. As alumni students, I require your support. Yeah, Gautami, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm gonna talk a bit about health informatics. So health informatics is essentially where I'm not sure if you've heard of workflows. So think of them as flowcharts. You've certainly heard of flowcharts, right? So you would have right? Yeah. So they're kind of like flowcharts in a way. So you use workflows to understand, to translate the clinical knowledge um, to to technical. So let's say you have a protocol, like a clinical protocol, like, oh, these are the things that you should follow when a patient with a third degree burn comes in. So you would translate that information in a way that's digestible to someone with a technical background, right? So that is what health informatics is. It's just translating your clinical knowledge in a way that's digestible for the tech people. Simply, it's I mean a part of it, right? So I would definitely suggest that if you want to do health informatics in Canada, then it's best if you apply to Canadian universities and not colleges, because I think only universities offer practical experience or internship. But if there are any colleges out there that do offer internship, um, then definitely look into it and consider you can consider that as well. The only reason why I am asking you that you look for a program that offers an internship is because, like I said, for me, I'm not sure how much the program has helped me, but what it did help me with was opening the doors. And to open the doors, what you need is an internship program that is embedded in that program. So you definitely need to consider like any master's program, like no matter what it is, not health informatics, but any master's program that you're going to take, it's best if you can look for a program that offers internship. That might always not be the case, but if there is a program that is out there but that offers an internship, then you better consider it a bit more than you would the others. So I do have a list of schools that offer masters in informatics in Canada, and you can certainly look into that. And I mean, informatics is not the only thing. There are other things that you can look into. Um, uh, what you can do with an informatics degree is you can look into pharmacy informatics. I'm not sure if you've heard of Epic. Epic is kind of like the biggest EMR, electronic medical record system vendor in the whole world. So they offer positions called clinical analysts. So they have different modules. So they have oncology, pharmacy, ambulatory, inpatient. So they have different set of modules like softwares, right? So a software for pharmacy, a software for ambulatory, etc., etc. So they actually prefer it if you have a clinical background and an informatics background for these positions. And they're very highly paid, very in demand. If you actually manage to pass their exam, then they're very in demand positions that you can look into. You can probably just look up Epic analyst positions, and then you would understand what I'm talking about. Some of the things that I'm talking about may seem a bit blurry, but then once you look into it, I am sure you will understand what I'm talking about. The other thing that you can that an informatics degree would provide is opportunities in knowledge translation or sir మీరు mute లో ఉన్నారు.
Okay.
You were saying something? No? Okay.
No.
The other thing that you can look into is knowledge translation or knowledge delivery, which is what I am doing right now. So I work at a health tech company where I basically make clinical protocols and something called order sets. You can probably look that term up. It's very interesting. So what I do is I look at whatever guidelines are out there. So say CCS, Canadian Cardiothoracic Society, or other AHA, American Heart Association, etc., etc. And then I look at all these guidelines, and then I simplify those guidelines into check boxes, and then I put them in a software so that a physician can just check mark instead of having to write the whole thing out. I mean, I think, go ahead.
Does we need to have any technical background for this? Or
I think
any
it's
code?
Oh, no.
Any
No. So the software is like super easy to learn for me anyway. It's like you really don't need any sort of technical background to do this. It's kind of like it's just like bolding or italicizing, which you don't really need technical background for. You just look at a 10 minutes YouTube video and then you would understand, oh, this is how I do. Okay. So it's not hard at all. It's very, very easy. I think clinical knowledge is more important for this sort of a job. Unfortunately, I really hate clinic. I really wanted to get away from the clinical part of everything, but then I am back into it. So that's exciting. And then you can also look into data analytics. You can, I'm not sure if you've heard of machine learning, predictive analytics. It's really, really huge right now. So if you have a health informatics degree, you do get to dive a bit more into data analysis and stuff, which is it's very popping right now. It's a very lucrative job.
Is it same like health informatics, Canada and US? Is it same, or which is better?
I definitely think US is like on top. When it comes to health informatics, I think US is definitely on top. You have lots more opportunities there, and I think
whether you suggest in Canada or US, or the opportunities are more in US or Canada. All students cannot become a Toronto University student, like you.
Sir, Maria, in Toronto University, you can go in. There are lots of other universities out there.
Canada చిన్నదే కదా, మన ఆంధ్రప్రదేశ్ అంత ఉండదని నువ్వే చెప్పావు. అలాంటప్పుడు యుఎస్ తీసుకోమంటావా, కెనడా తీసుకోమంటావా?
I think it really depends on what you're looking for. If you want some stability and you don't want to deal with all the visa issues, then I think Canada might be a better option. But if you want to do something more challenging, and there are lots more opportunities in US. Like I'm going to be completely honest. US is much better if you want to earn money. It's super, yeah, there's so many things that you can do in US. So you really have to weigh your options and see which is the right option for me.
Yes, you had a conversation with me, said that means PR will be very easy in Canada compared to US.
Yeah, for sure. I think in US, once you're done with your education, I think you get something called OPT. I'm not completely sure, but I think you get that, and then you get your H-1B, and then applying for a green card is like apparently extremely hard, and you just keep renewing your H-1B, and by the time you get your green card, it's apparently a very long process, whereas in Canada it's probably like 3 years max. So you definitely have to consider everything, and for me, even if I do want to go to US, I think once I get my PR, it's going to be supremely easy to go to the US because I think they value Canadian PR a bit more in US. So yeah, I mean, you definitely have to weigh your options and see what works best for you. Right. So there's also something called project management that you can look into if you want to go, if you're looking to work in Canada. So for project management, what they look at is it's very interesting. So see these options that where you have like a 4-year degree, 36 months leading projects, 35 hours of project management education or CAPM certification. So obviously you guys have a 4-year degree. It's actually a 6-year degree, so there's nothing to worry about on that front. But then when you talk about 36 months leading projects, actually, those 8 months, 12 months of you guys doing a research project that actually counts towards that experience. Like our theses actually counts toward that experience. So in any other job where you had to do any sort of project management, like, drafting a timeline, like a project timeline, or how do I put this? Arranging meetings and everything. So any sort of a thing, anything that is part of a project counts towards project management, and that time will account for those 36 months leading projects. And the 35 hours of project management, you can there's certain courses, there's certain master programs out there that you can take, which would fulfill that requirement. And those master programs would also have you complete a part of those 36 months leading projects. So you would have about, I don't know, 8 months or 6 months where the masters would give you an opportunity to lead a project. So project management is actually pretty good in Canada as well. It pays you very well. So that is something that you can definitely look into. And because of my master's program, they actually had a course about project management, so that counts. If I want to, I can apply for this license right away.
Because we are talking about after joining in MS project, is it that project?
మనం ఈ 5th year లో చేసిన ప్రాజెక్ట్ కూడా 12 months కౌంట్ అవుతుంది.
First
So
year project.
yeah, so 36 months కదా సార్, అందులో 12 months ఆ ప్రాజెక్ట్ పెట్టుకోవచ్చు అనమాట, రీసెర్చ్ ప్రాజెక్ట్ దట్ ఐ వర్క్ ఫర్ దిస్ రీసెర్చ్ ప్రాజెక్ట్ అండ్ ఎవ్రీథింగ్. సో అలాగే వర్క్ ఎక్స్పీరియన్స్ ఉంటే ఆ 1 year పెట్టేసుకోవచ్చు. So it really depends. Like, I think this is something that can be done when you're, I don't know, 2 years into work.
While study, while work, is it possible?
For some it is possible, sir. Like ikkadaithe vallandaru ma classmates andaru, they used to work and come to class. Work full time and then come to class. So yeah, this is very lucrative. I mean, the thing that I like about project management is you don't really need clinical experience, nor do you need technical experience. It's very dependent on your organizational skills. So if you're very well organized and if you are obsessed with leading people, then project management is like a really good thing that you can look into. And there are other opportunities as well. I think some programs offer masters in public. A lot of programs offer masters in public health, but those programs are offered mostly in universities, and that does mean that you need a really good IELTS score, at least 7. But the opportunities that you have with a master's in public health are abundant. And there are also pharmacy technician programs that are out there. And then you can also look into masters in health systems, masters in health administration, masters in management. So if you look at this masters in management, this is a really interesting program. I got a link channel. So this program is offered by Western Ivy University in Ontario. ఇక్కడ consultancies అనేవి, I'm not sure if you've heard of Deloitte. You've heard of Deloitte, right? So Deloitte is a consultancy, and it's a really huge company. Sir?
Consultants in the sense, will they provide the course? Will they provide the opportunity, or?
Oh no! So this program, it provides you case competitions, where they would give you, okay, imagine that you're a team of 4 consultants, and this is your healthcare case, work through it and give me a solution. So this particular program is apparently, it has a 94% employment rate, and it's very highly regarded. So if you want to look into a program, and the only requirements for this program are you need IELTS 7 at least, and then you don't really need an MBA background or a marketing background to get into it. You just need a degree. So definitely something that you can look into if you manage to get IELTS, a good IELTS score. Yep. So I think that's about it. I don't know if I have any more slides, but yeah.
Yeah, please stop sharing. It's open to audience. Yeah, Gautami, please stop sharing.
How do I do this?
There will be red color in top. There will be stop share is there. You can see stop.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. Please. Yeah. Yeah. What you suggest to your juniors, 5th Form D students especially, 5th Form D project. You have said me that okay, the project where you, I think under me and MS Raju sir, you did the project in the pediatrics, is it?
Yeah.
I think that time means we did like there is data something we did. Funnily, we have made some data, and we have made good article. So that article, what is the impact of article on your career? So you said that really they wondered by seeing our article and our project work. So they asked you some questions regarding project. They impressed. So that is one of the criteria to get opportunity in Canada. You said that.
So ఆ థీసిస్ రాయడం వల్ల నన్ను క్వశ్చన్స్ అయితే థీసిస్ గురించి ఏం అడగలేదు సార్, కానీ when I was applying, I certainly did mention that I worked on my own thesis, and I think they regarded that highly. They definitely took that into consideration when they were evaluating my application for entry into the program. But I think the biggest thing that writing that thesis has helped me with was certainly my English, because for me it's very, I don't know, it's a good thing that I got used to writing those sort of things, because it really did help me when I was working on my assignments, because I did assignments రాసినప్పుడు first లో చాలా foreign గా అనిపించేది అన్నమాట, because I'm not used to that sort of an education. But when I look back at it, I thought my thesis experience really helped me understand how to take all that information and then, kind of merge it all together into like 2 pages or 3 pages of information. So I think it was a really good experience for me just working on that thesis.
Yeah. Any more questions? Participants, any more questions? Swapna?
Okay.
Yeah, Dr. Bharat.
What about the scope of the clinical research in Canada, madam?
You mean like research trials and everything?
Yeah, if we want to become a clinical research coordinator or any part of the clinical research team, so what does we need to have before going for that type of work?
I do think they offer graduate programs in that area. We have a couple of students. I think what a clinical research coordinator does is you do need some data analysis skills, because that is certainly huge. If you want to get into research, then I think that's pivotal that you have some data analysis skills. For me, I was because of this program, I'm trained in SPSS. So there are definitely lots of programs out there that will not only teach you data analysis, but will also give you an opportunity to get into research, to do actual research projects. I haven't looked at it, but I'm sure if you look into it, you'll definitely find lots of them.
Okay.
No problem.
Yeah. Any other participants?
How many years does it take to get a PR in Canada, ma'am?
I just applied for a postgrad work visa, I think, in February, like I mentioned, and I just received it. So I think I have to wait at least 1 year before I apply for PR. I think I am terrible with immigration. I have a friend who kind of advises me as to what to do. But I think I do have to wait at least 1 year more before applying for PR.
Great to have such type of friends in this again.
I know, she's so helpful.
Don't worry. Shortly, you'll be, I think by September, you'll get it. Yeah.
Hopefully.
What do you suggest for interns? Like the Swapna is intern, but she has been coming without leave.
Yeah.
Good service.
I took a lot of leaves when I was in program. When I was doing my PharmD, I did take a lot of leaves, but I think I definitely paid more attention to classes. I really liked Sharmila Madam's class. I think she's very good at teaching all the pharmacology basics and everything. I really paid attention when people were teaching. And I also think, just taking the material seriously, because it's very hard, right? Because mana GGH lo ever pattichukoru. So it's kind of like it's very hard to focus because you feel like whatever effort you're putting is not being appreciated. So it's very hard to. I completely understand why someone would feel discouraged to, make any effort in that sort of an environment. But I think you have to understand that nobody gets paid any attention in public hospitals, especially in India. So whatever education that you're learning is for yourself, is for your own benefit, and that you have to be serious about it.
Exactly. Mohana. Shabla madam.
Hi, Gautami.
Hi, ma'am.
Yes, I am fine. How do you do?
I'm doing great.
It's a big proud moment really we are having now by seeing you. Really, I feel very proud of you. I would like to
thank
ask
you.
the other students who are joined here, especially the PharmD student, you can take Gautami as a role model. Okay, so what she was when she was studying here as a student and what she is now. You can ask, you can interact. That is the way where the spark starts. What is the time and what is the moment which make her to be like this? Okay, so it is a real opportunity. When she was studied here also, she is like that only. We can understand by seeing the students and their attitude. We can predict their future, how they will be. Yes, I predict myself. I predicted that Gautami definitely will reach some high level. That was happened so. And I ask the PharmD students, please you interact her. You can get some idea. That is what we have to, by studying of the PharmD. You have to achieve something.
Yes.
By seeing the person who achieved already, you can ask them what is the way. So by simply keeping silent, it never be help us. Okay, so just you come forward to ask and interact. I'm not forcing you to ask the questions here. Just you get the contact of her, Gautami. Later also you can interact with her to know what is the way to get. Okay, so how can you improve yourself, and what is the actual plan, or the way how she got interested to involve the informatics, or to get opportunity there in the Canada, how she is proceeding there, how it will be helpful to her, and for the PharmD students you can ask. Okay, so Gautami, you can also yourself just you can give how the students can from here, especially the interns or the fifth PharmD students, what way they have to focus on their study to achieve something good in their career in future.
Absolutely. I think it's very important to understand what subjects are more useful. So if you want to get into like the more tech side of things, then I think it would be better if you can look at what if you can focus on your theses. Why I'm talking about theses is there's a data analysis component to your theses, right? So if you learn different softwares and try to understand at least minimum data analytic techniques, then that would be a good first step if you want to get into machine learning or predictive analytics, or more data analysis programs. But I think if you are more interested in the clinical aspect of it, then I think you would have to concentrate more on therapeutics or pharmacology, and anything that involves pathophysiology. So those are some of the subjects that you have to concentrate on. And I also think, I don't know, maybe I am a bit biased, but I think it's always best if you can manage to get a good IELTS score. I think that's really, really important, because that opens up your opportunities a lot more, right? So say if you have a 6.5 or 6, then you would still have like lots of opportunities, but I think if you have 7, then those opportunities become bigger. You can apply for universities, you can apply for really competitive schools that will give you a good education, and that will open a lot more doors for you compared to like a college degree. But then it's not just that. There are some college degrees out there which offer practical experience. So I would definitely suggest something like pharmacy technician or other or programs like that. So you can definitely look into programs that offer practical experience as well, rather than just theory. So say I would definitely suggest not to go into HR or those sort of programs that would not lead you anywhere. So definitely stick to something that's kind of related to pharmacy, because pharmacy is a very saturated profession. Even in Canada, you'd be hard pressed to find actual pharmacist jobs. But I think what's important with pharmacy is there are many other opportunities that are derived from pharmacy that you can look into.
Does the publications have any impact on while applying to MS?
Malayaliku?
Does the publications have any impact on the while applying for MS?
I think if you're applying for a really competitive school, then it does matter, but otherwise it usually doesn't. Like I said, the thesis was more of a stepping stone to learn more skills. When I was applying to U of T, I think they did consider it though, because it's like a good school, so they did take that into consideration. But usually no.
So English is mandatory. Language makes so many things, as you said.
Yeah, I mean, నేను first లో వెళ్ళినప్పుడు like I used to think of myself, oh my gosh, my English is great, you know, like I thought was on cloud nine, right? I used to think very highly of myself. But once I got into this program, I realized, oh my gosh, I am probably the least, like I actually don't know English at all. Like that's what I thought, because pretty much every single person in my class was a Canadian, and I was the only international student in my class.
Yes.
So you can probably imagine that was very intimidating for me. But once you get used to it, you kind of get into it, and you just make some friends and just ease into it. Yeah. Yeah, I think even if you're not able to speak very well, I think it's not an issue as long as you can um, write and read very well. Then that should mostly be
So this
enough.
practical knowledge will helpful. Means students are working in GM or oncology or pediatrics or psychiatry. Can you suggest?
పబ్లిక్ హాస్పిటల్లో లైక్ చెప్తున్నాను కదా మన హాస్పిటల్లో there are no there are like very less opportunities to actually practice pharmacy.
Clinical knowledge.
So,
I mean, clinical knowledge and experience
Yeah.
cases. Is it helpful for? Is it similar like what there in Canada, or is need to?
ఇక్కడైతే ఇప్పుడు నేను చేస్తున్న జాబ్కి అయితే ఇట్స్ వెరీ యూస్ఫుల్. Clinical knowledge is like paramount అనమాట. I really think I should have paid lot more attention in college. But I think it really depends on what kind of job you have. కొన్ని జాబ్స్కి అసలు అవసరం లా అంత క్లినికల్ నాలెడ్జ్ అవసరం లా లైక్ జస్ట్ టచ్ you don't need like lots of
కెరీర్ ఆపర్చునిటీ ఇప్పుడు మన ఇప్పుడు స్వప్న ఉంది. సో హౌ కెన్ షీ ప్లాన్ లైక్ మీన్స్ whether means you have gone through, I think you have taken this one health technology, no? Your MS is health
informatics. Yeah,
health informatics. So after that you are working side is clinical side. So means how we can decide so MS in specific health technology or public health, is it depend on our skill, or obviously one joining into university, is it provide opportunity? So opportunity you can see there itself how it likes.
సో ఇప్పుడు పబ్లిక్ హెల్త్ వాటిలో తీసుకోవాలంటే it's better if you're a Canadian, like if you belong to that country, then you would definitely have more opportunities. If it's public health. But I think in terms of if you look at other masters, then maybe that's not so important, right? So it's very hard to decide what program you need to go into. But I think a very good first step is just concentrating on IELTS. Like, I'm not kidding, you'd really have to just get the guns out, like just practice a lot for IELTS. Just make sure that your score is at least 7, so that say you have I don't know, firstly you may think, oh, should I go for informatics, or should I go apply for a physician assistant program, or should I do this, should I do that? You have all these questions, right? You have all these questions in your brain. But the first thing that you have to consider is, if I get a 6.5, can I apply for an informatics program? So that's already gone, right? So that our question is already going. If you get a 6.5, then you can probably not. Then you can still apply to some programs, some informatics programs, but they're probably not as valuable as the ones that a university would offer. But for a physician assistant program, 6.5 is probably enough, like because they're mostly in US, right? So yeah, I mean, I do think you have to take care of your, like, just.
I hope we all understood. I really clarified very, it's a crystal clear. So targeting IELTS score, you can choose what you want to.
It's a good step. It's a good first step.
Obviously, today we got clarity information. It's not like that. Before clearing ILTs, we dream like, no, sir, I will take this one, that course, this course. We like lot of blah blah things are there. They're in Cloud9. So, but after your conversation, first you have to concentrate. Mention 6.5, 7, or 8. So it made us like it is this. Toronto University or some ex university. So then she will guide us. Already she is there, no? So if we have 8, we can speak a lot. By having 6.5 and 6, then asking us also it doesn't good. So as you see mentioned,
6.5 is also good, sir. Like it depends on the kind of opportunity you're looking at. It's just that if you have a good score, then you have lots of things to look at. That's it.
and it depends also what type of university we select also. What do you say?
Yeah, sir, definitely. For certain programs, the university that you choose is very important. But for some, it may not be so. So for something like informatics or masters in public health, it's very important that you choose a really great school. But for something like, I don't know, a physician assistant program or a data analysis program, then all you need is actual practical skills. It doesn't really matter.
It will be good.
Sir?
Physician assistant program, is it good?
Yes, sir. It's a really good program. The only thing, like I said before, is the visa. You would have to.
Because like our best example, if you take Sucharita like student, the one who have worked for 40s or one who worked for hospital, one who have the clinical knowledge. Most people are passionate towards healthcare. So I think that physician assistant course will be helpful for them. They also feel work satisfaction will be there.
Yeah, no, pharmacy is like a really saturated profession, but I think a physician assistant is, you actually have lots of opportunities.
So is there many universities are providing same course, physician assistants?
US like the Chala schools are nicer. Like I said before, if you want to become a physician assistant in Canada, then you need a PR or a Canadian citizenship. Okay. But if you don't have it, then what you can do is you can complete your physician assistant program in US, and then clear a qualifying exam in Canada. So most of the times people don't really ask for that qualifying exam. As long as you have an American PA license, then that's enough. But I think a lot of companies now are asking you to take that qualifying exam. So I mean, ikkada Canada lo okvela PR unte, there are 3 or 4 schools that you can apply to for physician assistant. Only for three or 4 schools. That's it. But in US, it's like 20 or 24 schools.
Okay, one of your favorite teacher, Rajnikant sir, would like to interact with you. Yeah, Rajnikant
sure.
sir. Rajnikant sir.
Good morning, Gautam.
Hi, sir.
How are you?
Hi, sir. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm fine. Good morning, NVR sir, and all the faculty members, students.
Thank you, sir.
It's a very nice interaction, sir. So far, I have participated in many interactions. She shared a lot of information about the opportunities that are available for pharma graduates in Canada. It's very nice to interact, and I have one small query.
Yes,
what about the area of drug discovery and development? Is there any postgraduate program in drug discovery and development?
I haven't looked at it, but I'm pretty sure there would be. I think it's a really booming profession anywhere, like not just in Canada. You can go to pretty much any country and you probably find that drug discovery is a huge thing.
Yes.
Especially in COVID.
Yes, Gautami, if you could share any details of that in the area of drug discovery development, so that we can share with our students who want to pursue their career in drug discovery development field, so they can take up the MS program in Canada and they can also build up the career.
Absolutely. I can look more into it and I can share that information with Ramarao sir. And would that be a good option, you think?
Yes, you can please share.
Okay, I'll do that then. Yeah.
I hope you are doing well during this COVID times. How is the
Yes, sir.
situation there in Canada?
Ikkadanta remote work anamata. So it's very there's no I'm completely safe.
Yeah.
He is
Yeah.
working
Take
as
care.
assistant physician, sir. He make protocols, everything.
Yes, yes. Nice, man. Nice to interact with you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you for your question.
Thank you for your time. Yeah.
Yeah,
No
I think,
problem.
what is
Thank you for
time?
listening.
Gautami?
Tell you, sir. I think it's about 1
Oh, 1 minute.
1 hour. Yeah.
You are spending. You see, I think your sleep time. You are making trouble.
లేదు సార్ ఇంకా వర్క్
participants.
ఉంది.
Ma, participants, so they are spent with us. Anybody interested? Why the students are such a quiet? It's not silent class.
But I think I definitely understand. So it's very mana education system hai alaga. Like people are just they like to keep to themselves. I think I might get a lot more questions if they interact with me. I mean, they can interact with me on Facebook or they can just chat me. I'll leave my email, and you guys can if you have any questions, and I'm definitely happy to answer them. If you ask me personally, yeah.
Okay. Any more questions, Swapna?
No, sir.
Okay. Last question. Have you taken any COVID vaccine?
ఇక్కడ చెప్తున్నా కదా సార్ రీఇన్ఫెక్షన్ వస్తుంది అని చెప్తుంటే ఇంకా కోవిడ్ వ్యాక్సిన్ తీసుకున్నామని అడుగుతున్నారు మీరు అసలు
తీసుకోవాలి.
చెప్పండి.
ఎలా మేనేజ్ చేశారు? మీరు ఫారెన్ డెవలపింగ్ కంట్రీస్ లో ట్రీట్మెంట్ అలానే ఉంది, మా దగ్గర అలానే ఉంది. హౌ యు ఆర్
కోవిడ్ వ్యాక్సిన్ వస్తే ఇండియాలోనే ఎక్కువ చేస్తారు సార్. ఇక్కడ ఏదో ప్లాంట్ ఉందంట కదా.
మాకు సేమ్ ట్రీట్మెంట్ $3,000 చెప్పింది అమ్మ, 5 days ట్రీట్మెంట్. సో ఇండియాలో జస్ట్ హోమ్ క్వారంటైన్ లో ఉండే ట్రీట్ చేసాము చాలా పేషెంట్స్ ని.
అంతే సార్. Like in India, you don't really have, I don't know, lots of resources to treat patients in hospitals. So
I experienced that after listening Dan class. Means
even India is inserting the system of NHS, National Health Recording System.
Oh,
our Modi planned for that, but we don't know when they implement that.
ఇంకా కోవిడ్ వెళ్ళిపోయాక అప్పుడు వస్తుంది.
నువ్వు ఇండియా వచ్చే లోపల మొత్తం సెట్ చేస్తాను చూడండి, ఓకేనా?
త్వరగా చేయండి సార్.
డెత్ రేట్ కూడా మా దగ్గర తక్కువ.
ఏం సార్? చూసాను సార్.
తక్కువ. అమెరికాలో 60 లక్షల మంది చనిపోయారు, మా దగ్గర ఎవరు చనిపోలేదు. చనిపోయిన వాళ్ళు కూడా కోమార్బిడిటీస్ ఉన్న వాళ్ళు తప్ప చిన్నపిల్లవాడు కానీ ప్రెగ్నెంట్ కానీ యంగ్ కుర్రోళ్ళు కానీ ఎవరు చనిపోలేదు. ఏదో రేర్ గా చనిపోయారు అంతే. కనిపిస్తున్నారు అయినా వీఆర్ అనేబుల్ టు ట్రీట్ యువర్ పేషెంట్స్. See how our country by following traditional methods, by following
నేను యుఎస్ సిటిజన్ కాదు, నేను ఇక్కడ కెనడాలో ఉంటుంది.
But even Canada also, so there is mortality is more. Even developing countries, I don't know why is. I think they are saying that so Indian people have more immunity, or they took that BCG vaccine and they might have experienced malaria. They might have taken chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine. That's why they are not affected as much other countries. Is it true?
Probably not true, sir. I think it's.
అక్కడ BCG vaccine చేయరంట కదా, అక్కడ చేయించుకోరంట కదా వ్యాక్సినేషన్ ప్రాసెస్.
ఇక్కడ జనరల్ గా అయితే ఇన్ఫ్లుయెన్జా వ్యాక్సిన్ అది ఎక్కువ ఉంటుంది. బట్ ఐ have not heard about the BCG vaccine thing. I think it's because మన ఇండియాలో it's probably because we are so used to just I guess just having cold and everything. I don't know what it is about our country, but we seem to be pretty resistant. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Gautami. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Swapna. Thank you all my colleagues, Sharma Madam, Rajnikant, and my dear students. So we hope you'll guide us. We'll take our students to Toronto University or somewhere in Canada. Thank you for your time. So we are very thankful to our dynamic principal, Professor Ramaran Nadinla, and our management, Sri Ivanjal Garu, and my dear students, for providing Zoom webinar facility so that we are able to conduct this program. I hope we can understand. Even students are sitting at home and they're listening, but even they're not asking questions. So we don't mind. You can interact by social media, Facebook. So
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
okay, thank you. You shared wonderful information to our students. Surely we hopeful in further months. I think some class are going to complete. So we communicate to you. So surely we'll expect your help in future. Thank you very much,
No
ma'am.
problem, sir. Happy to help anytime.
Take care.
Thank you, sir. Bye. Bye, guys.
Bye, ma'am. Bye. I'm ending the session.